Alright, here is the unboxing of the 2022 Revolver Super Deluxe Edition. On the front we replicate the original artwork created by Klaus Voormann, though we don't have any text of any kind, but nice glossy finish. On the spine we have the title in its original font. On the back we replicate Robert Whittaker's original back cover photograph, but we have track listing for all 5 of the discs that are included. Inside the slipcase we have the CD wallet, which replicates the original album artwork. This time we do have the word Revolver, and then we just have the original back cover with the side 1 and side 2 track listings. On the inside we have all of the discs, each in their own individual sleeve. So we have the new stereo mix, which replicates the original artwork faithfully, although it does not say the lead singer names. It just has the song titles, complete with original Parlophone label. The mono version is exactly the same, except it has mono written at the top instead of stereo. And again, the track listing on the back. The Revolver EP, we replicate an original Parlophone single bag the way it would have looked in the 60s, with the A and B sides of the label as if it were on vinyl. This box set is also available on vinyl, but this is just the CD version. It does say 45 RPM though. And then we have the Sessions CDs 1 and 2, which have the artwork originally designed by Robert Freeman that would have been the front cover, with the track listing on the back, and then each of the CDs is pressed as though it's a radio only or promotional disc with some handwritten text on it, so that's interesting. So that's the CDs. And then we have the booklet, which is 100 pages. Lovely gloss coating on the front. It just says Revolver. All of the box sets feature beautiful books. The books are one of the main buying points. So in this book we have lots of great photographs. We have a foreword by Paul McCartney, as there are in all of them. Introduction by Giles Martin, as there are in all of the box sets. We have an essay by Questlove from the Roots about his appreciation for the album. And then we have some notes by Kevin Howlett about the road to Revolver, so some of the circumstances leading up to it, including just their frustration with touring at that point and wanting to expand in the studio. And then we have the most interesting part of every book, which is track by track, where we go track by track through the album. And this has explicit details on when and how it was recorded, including how many takes there were of each, which take was the master, how many reduction mixes were done, down to which tracks on the tape contain which performances. Really fascinating stuff that goes into extreme detail about why their use of the tape was so pioneering and innovative. We also have tape box covers for the given sessions, as well as lyric sheets for the songs. And this is generally the case for all of the box sets. This also talks about Paperback Writer and Rain, the contemporaneous single that was released at the same time as the album. There's some notes on the cover, including a comic strip by Klaus Voormann about how he was commissioned to create the cover. And then a reception essay about how it was received. Talks about how in the US the reception was different because the album was altered, and there was also the furor around John's Jesus comment. Track listing, credits. So that is the Revolver box set. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. I'm Brandon Ware. You're watching Angel 65, my channel for all things music related, both music posts and music reviews. This video is Chapter 8 of the Beatles Deep Dive, where I am discussing the Revolver Super Deluxe Edition. So, at this point in the series, we are reviewing all of the remixes that have been done over the past few years by Giles Martin. And I'm just talking about the box sets and why you may or may not want to buy them. I decided to listen to all of them all the way through and read all the books and everything so that I had a good comparison for all of them before deciding to do the review. And I think that was a good choice because it helped me be more objective about which ones are the most valuable and why. With that in mind, let's discuss Revolver. So, it is my favorite Beatles album, and I know it's a lot of people's favorites, and I think the reason I prefer it to probably Sgt. Pepper or Abbey Road, which are very close in second and third place, is because I think it's the best balance of them still writing sort of whimsical pop songs, more of what they were known for in the early days, except these ones are a lot fewer of them on this album are about love. And it shows the beginnings of their experimentation. You heard them get more confident as writers and branch out into more abstract subject matter on Rubber Soul. At this point, the recordings are beginning to match the quality of the songs. And they're really pushing the limits of what can be done in a recording studio. They're not taking it to the extreme as they would the following year with Pepper, but they're still pushing the boundaries of what can be done, but keeping the songs themselves contained within the basic premise of a pop song. And I think that's what makes it a perfect, immaculate album to me. It's one of my favorite albums of all time, and every time I listen to it, I'm just amazed how much emotion and power can be crammed into something that's less than 35 minutes long. It really is a masterclass into just how to create a perfect group of pop songs, sequence them perfectly, create a beautiful cover for them, and arrange them in a studio in a way that at the time was very groundbreaking. Today it might seem a bit primitive by comparison to what's possible now, but the sheer fact that they were taking such risks means the album, even today, sounds very fresh and very innovative. So I guess we can go track by track. Taxman opens the album. This is the first time a George Harrison composition has been used to open the album, and I don't necessarily think it's the greatest piece of lyric writing ever. I do think it's a bit hypocritical. Rich people talking about how much money gets taken away from them. It's not like they didn't still have a ton, although I guess that's not necessarily true because later on, the deals with Brian Epstein would show that they were getting a bit screwed by some of the companies taking advantage of them, and it wasn't necessarily Brian Epstein's fault either. But regardless, it's kind of a silly, hypocritical song, but musically it's fantastic. And the book in the box set goes into tons of detail that otherwise I would not have known. I'm sure this information is out there elsewhere. It was just great to have it in an official Beatles product that's matched to the album itself. So one thing I didn't know about that song was that the guitar solo is played by Paul. I would not have known that. It's not George playing that, it's Paul playing that. So that's a very fascinating little tidbit for you. The next track has got to be the most ballsy second track on an album I can possibly think of, which is Eleanor Rigby. To this day, one of my all-time favorites, an absolutely incredible song. The string arrangement is just perfect, and to hear the beauty of that arrangement, including the wonderful, surreal, and kind of dark lyric by Paul, much darker than we're accustomed to from Paul at this point in the Beatles' career, is just gorgeous. In fact, I love that song and the recording of it so much that I actually wrote an essay about it in college, and just about how innovative the Beatles were with their use of tape and with their songwriting. And I think Eleanor Rigby is, at least at that point, the pinnacle of that. I'm Only Sleeping is a fantastic John composition that has the first instance of backwards guitar on it. I think Rain was released before this, but I Am Only Sleeping was recorded first. I believe. I could be mistaken about that. And it's just a fun, really psychedelic, kind of slow, plotty track, and I dig it. And then we get Love You Too, which is George taking his Indian influence to the extreme. We get more of that later on, and of course Within You, Without You, and The Inner Light, but on this track, this is probably the first example of him really going deep into Indian territory using the sitar and a tabla played by Anil Bhagwat. So again, another really fun composition, and I just love the sound of the artificial double track on it. It sounds so haunting. Just the slight delay between the two voices, it's just really intense. And Paul's harmony on it, on some of the lines, it's just these small little arrangement touches that, while they seem maybe like they're taken for granted now, like the Beatles were pushing this stuff to its limit in the day, and not that many people were doing this kind of thing with that much taste in their arrangements. Speaking of Here, There, and Everywhere, is, I guess, inspired by the Beach Boys. To me, it doesn't sound anything like the Beach Boys. It sounds a lot more romantic than what the Beach Boys were writing. Not to throw any shade at the Beach Boys. I think they did some amazingly clever stuff as well, and of course the Beatles were obviously influenced by it, but I think Here, There, and Everywhere is just a stellar track. When I saw Pat Metheny do a solo guitar show at the Paramount Theater in Denver in October of 23, he incorporated a little acoustic rendition of Here, There, and Everywhere into one of the improvs he was doing, and as soon as that happened, I got really excited. The person that I went with, my brother, didn't realize what it was. I'm like, you don't know what that is? That's Here, There, and Everywhere by the Beatles that he's doing there, which I thought was great. Yellow Submarine, Ringo does a great job making it his own. And again, the sound effects, like they hadn't really done much of that up till this point, including a bunch of sound effects on the tape to really give the impression of an underwater environment. Brilliant. And one of my all-time faves on the album is She Said, She Said. And what makes it for me is the drumming. I get really upset anytime somebody says Ringo is not a good drummer or that what he did was not challenging and things like that. Is he the most technically proficient player in the world? No, but he was incredibly unique in his style, and She Said, She Said is an amazing example of that, as is Rain, which is not included on the album, but on the Sessions disc you get the take of Rain as it was originally recorded at its original speed, which is significantly faster than the finished version. The tape was slowed down to create the effect that you hear on the tape. And so when I heard that, it just blew me away because the drumming already sounds complex on it. And then you hear how fast he was playing it. It's absolutely mind-blowing, as is She Said, She Said. It's just such an incredible track. The change of time signature in the middle eight, it's brilliant. Most musicians of their day were not doing things like that. And that's what made them so unique. And that's why I love Revolver, because they're really pushing the limits of their songwriting and their recording without going overboard, which you could argue they did on Pepper. I'm not saying that I think that, but you could make that case. Side 2, Good Day Sunshine. I've always liked it. I don't know if it's a favorite. It's not one of the highlights of the album for me, but again, it's just the sequence of songs is so perfect that you can't imagine that song not being there, nor could you imagine And Your Bird Can Sing not being there, which the harmonized guitar parts are just fantastic. You can almost hear heavy metal in there, even though it's not arranged like a metal song at all, just the harmony guitars and the licks that they play throughout. It's just, that's the kind of thing that you could almost imagine the guitar players from Iron Maiden doing. Forgive me, I can't remember their names at this particular moment. And then For No One, beautiful track, love the horn on it. Dr. Robert, really fun track. Again, all of John's songs on this I think are just phenomenal. I think this has the best contributions from John of any of the Beatles albums. His contributions to Rubber Soul were also really outstanding, but Revolver just has some of his best work, which is why I don't like the American version of it, because it took 3 of his key tracks off on the album and put them somewhere else, so it felt very unbalanced in that way. I want to tell you another great track with just lovely guitar sounds. I love the way the guitars are so chimey. I always enjoyed that track, and I love the harmonies on it as well, especially at the end where Paul is kind of wailing on top. I got time, and he's just doing a little bit of movement. It just adds so much character to it, and it's so much fun. Got to Get You Into My Life is Paul's tribute to marijuana. I learned that first from Steve Turner's book, A Hard Day's Right, and it is confirmed in the book for the box set as well that it was written about pot. Had I not read that, I don't think I ever would have guessed that, but it's really funny, and it's a good song with the horns. And then, of course, the other standout of the album to me is the final track, Tomorrow Never Knows. It's a classic example of saving the big finish for the end. There's so many examples of that where I love when a record just finishes on such a high note, but the thing is you need all those other 13 songs in front of it as foreplay that just builds up to this epic climax that is Tomorrow Never Knows, which is one of the most innovative tracks ever recorded, and it still sounds weird, freaky, even scary to this day. So to me, it's a perfect album, back to front. I can't think of a single song on it that I would drop, that I dislike, that I think could have been done differently. It's just a phenomenal album. And again, the fact that it does its business in under 35 minutes is striking. It takes most bands 3 times that amount of time to say as much as the Beatles said on that one album. My favorite Beatles album. Probably my least favorite of the box sets, unfortunately, for several reasons. Number one, no Atmos or surround sound mix. I don't understand that. So this is the first of the sets to be done with the demix process. So using the technology that was originally used for the Get Back documentary to isolate some of the dialogue, Giles Martin was able to get individual tracks. So in the cases where they would record the rhythm section, bass, drums, and guitar all to a single track on the tape, they were able to use this artificial intelligence learning to separate them into separate tracks. And so the new stereo remix is fantastic. It's done the way really it should have always been done, but without changing the character of the album too much. And so it's disappointing that given all that flexibility that they then had, that there's no Atmos mix. I believe there's an Atmos mix that's for headphones available on streaming platforms, but I'm not going to bother with that. I want the full Atmos experience with height speakers and everything. And so the fact that it's not in there is a major downside of the box set. A plus is that you do get the mono mix. So if you are getting this and you don't have that mono albums box set, then you do get the original mono mix, which is closer to what the Beatles had intended than the original stereo mix was. And the new stereo mix is a big, big, big improvement on the original, but it just is unfortunate that there's no spatial audio. The other factor that leads to this being, I think, probably the least valuable of the 5 box sets is just the fact that there's less than 3 hours of audio split across 5 discs. I have no problem with splitting the audio based on themes. What I do have a problem with is charging what I considered an extortionate amount for it. I believe when I bought this, it was over $100, which, given there's less than 3 hours of audio, is, I think, unacceptable. I paid for it anyway because it's my favorite album, and of course I wanted to hear the session CDs, but I was very disappointed that there's less than 3 hours worth of audio. It could have easily fit on 2 CDs, and they split it across to 5. So you get the mono and stereo mixes, you get the EP, which has the original mono versions of Paperback Writer and Rain, as well as new stereo versions. So that CD is less than 10 minutes, it's like less than 11 minutes long. They could have even put it on a little 3-inch mini CD just to add some novelty, but they didn't. It's printed on a full standard size 5-inch CD, and it uses less than 10% of the available length. So, or I guess more, because 8 would be 10%. And then you get 2 session CDs, which are around 40 minutes each. The session CDs on the Sgt. Pepper and White Album boxes were a lot longer, because those box sets were not duplicated exactly on vinyl, which the Revolver and Let It Be boxes were, which I think was a mistake. I personally don't understand why you would want to buy that on vinyl. I prefer to just have the original album on vinyl, which I do have the new stereo mix, a separate standalone vinyl copy, but I wouldn't dream of having all the outtakes and stuff. I think that stuff is better experienced on CD. You know, the box set gives you the making of and the behind the scenes. If you want just the original album, then that's all I would opt for on vinyl. So I think that was a mistake to reduce the amount of session material to about 40 minutes on each CD, when they could have given you maybe 2 hours worth and given you more in-depth stuff. That said, what's on the session CDs is fascinating. To hear Rain at its original tempo, to hear some of the outtakes, including the previously released outtake of And Your Bird Can Sing, where John and Paul are just cracking up singing it. It's good fun to hear that stuff and hear them having fun with each other in the studio. But they could have painted a more complete picture and given you more stuff for each track. There's no alternate takes at all of of Good Day Sunshine, but every other song has a fair amount of alternates, including Tomorrow Never Knows. What I do love about the session CDs is that they are organized in the order that the songs were recorded and not the original track order, so I thought that was interesting. But overall, I personally found the box disappointing because it does not have a surround mix, and the CDs could have been more efficiently packaged, or the price could have been reduced if they wanted to split it across the 5 CDs the way they did. So would I recommend it? As a fan of the album, yes, but as just something to own, no. I do love the book. I love the track by track details. I think the biggest buying point for all 5 of the sets for me was the books, just because I love how they're organized. I love the beautiful graphic design. I'm not such a big fan of books that look like scrapbooks where there's a bunch of pictures pasted on top of each other and stuff that looks like it was written on sticky notes and stuff. I like books that are like fully justified, with pages dedicated to pictures and things that are like organized in rectangles with justified texts and columns. And most of the books in this box set series do that, so I really appreciate that. I'm a sucker for good graphic design, and the Revolver book has beautiful graphic design, as do pretty much all of them, except for, I would argue, the Let It Be set. I'm not a fan of the way that book was done, but the rest of them I love, and good graphic design gets me. So just for the book alone, it was worth it to me, even though it was still an unfair and over expensive price for the amount of material you get. That said, the new stereo remix is awesome. I was apprehensive about it, given that it was done with computer technology to separate stems. I had to wonder how much of it is what's actually on the tape and how much of it is the computer filling in what it can't do on its own. I'm not sure if that would reflect how the actual technology works, but when I played it, I was astonished by how good it sounds. So the new stereo mix is essential, I think. I would definitely recommend picking that up on vinyl or just the standalone CD. Worst option, streaming, but that's worth owning. Is the rest of the box set worth owning? If you're a diehard Beatles fan and Revolver's your favorite album, yes. If you're just looking for an experience of the album itself, then I would argue it's probably not the best value for money. And you get a fair amount of outtakes from it on Anthology 2, as well as Sgt. Pepper and Magical Mystery Tour, etc. So if you want just a taster of what the full box set offers, then Anthology 2 might be a better buy. Those are my thoughts, but I am curious to hear what people think. What are your opinions of the Revolver album and box set? If you own the vinyl version instead of the CD version of the box set, tell me why you would want that instead over the CD, because personally that's something that puzzles me, but I'm interested to hear what people think. So that's all for now. Thanks for watching.